After making arguably the most important video game of all time, and making this other game, Nintendo decided that wasn't enough. They chose to create another banger with Super Mario Bros. 3. It became the third best-selling game on the NES, which is impressive for the third game in a series at the time. This is the first Mario game where the series starts to be real video games that normal people want to play. Super Mario Bros. 3 is an improvement in almost every way from its predecessors, which is what I'm here to talk about today. Of all the classic Mario games, this is one I've actually played before on its GBA port. As is common with a lot of kids though, I found it pretty difficult and always got stuck around the third or fourth world. Returning to this game in my old age, I'm more optimistic about my ability to finally conquer it. The prospect of leaving the NES era of Mario games has also been a great motivator, since it only gets better from here. So let's jump into this series once again with Super Mario Bros. 3. Continuing the tradition with all older games, there's not much to say about the visual presentation. The environment and sprites of various enemies and Mario himself are all better than in previous entries. One unique element to this game's visuals is how the levels are constructed like a stage play. You can see wires that appear to suspend blocks in the air, and how Mario walks off stage at the end of a level. It's most obvious just in the title screen, where a curtain opens and Mario is walking around on stage. It's not a game-changing or defining element of Super Mario Bros. 3, and the game would not fundamentally change without it, but it is a nice touch when you notice it. Once again, Koji Kondo the GOAT returned to create this game's soundtrack, and as expected he killed it. This is one of the most iconic video game OSTs for a good reason, especially with songs like the two Overworld themes, the World 1 map theme, and my personal favorite, the Hammer Bro fight theme. As with the other NES Mario titles, several of these songs have been remade and remixed into future games in the series, showing that this soundtrack truly has stood the test of time. At the most basic level, the gameplay of Super Mario Bros. 3 is very similar to its predecessors. The game is still broken up into several worlds with unique themes and levels, and each one ends with a boss. However, what solidifies this game as the far superior one in its trilogy for me is how all of its innovations and additions improve the core formula. Mario just overall feels better to control, with a looser commitment to jumps and allowing for better mid-air corrections. The level design has more varied environments, themes, mechanics, enemies, and is more interactable than ever. Mario can pick up blue blocks to throw them around at enemies. Some power-ups allow you to break certain block types. Many green pipes have secrets in them. There's plenty of secret vines that lead to coins or power-up blocks, and you can finally slide down slopes and kill enemies along the way. In addition, several new power-ups have been introduced to expand Mario's movement options, with many becoming core staples of the series to this day. Returning power-ups from prior games are the Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Invincibility Star. They function the same way as before because hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Something I didn't mention in previous Mario game reviews is the original sprite for Fire Mario, where they just changed his color palette to red like he's in Kramer's apartment in Seinfeld.
What's going on in there?
What?
That light!
Oh, the red.
This is altered in later games, and I think the change is for the better. The main power-up of this game is the Super Leaf, turning Mario into a raccoon. This power-up grants Mario a short-range tail swing to hit enemies and blocks, a short hover in the air, and temporary flight. If you sprint uninterrupted for a long time, you'll fill the P meter to max, and Mario will take off to the skies for a limited time. This is most often used for secrets just barely out of the point of view from ground level, but it can also be helpful to skip through levels if you're lame. Nintendo must have known I'd be playing this game over 30 years later because they gave us a goddamn frog suit. This is everything I could have ever asked for. Unfortunately, it's not all that good and is really only helpful underwater, as on-land movement becomes restricted to awkwardly hopping around. I've seen videos of frogs running around on solid ground before, so clearly they did not get the memo. It's not impossible to use outside of water, but not exactly the best option either. I think they should have put this frog suit on the cover instead of the raccoon suit, but whatever, I guess. The last new power-up is the hammer suit, allowing Mario to throw hammers in an arc to kill enemies with ease. It's a pretty interesting ability that I almost never used, but I appreciate its addition nonetheless. Being able to murder Hammer Bros with their own weapons is very satisfying. There is technically another new power-up with the Tanuki suit, providing all of the same perks as the raccoon suit, with the added benefit of being able to transform into a statue to avoid damage. The reason for this technicality is because it's so similar to the raccoon power-up that I originally forgot to talk about it in this video. I had the whole script completed around 3 months ago and neglected to mention it because it was unremarkable. In spite of this, it's kind of funny to see how the Tanuki suit has made the raccoon power-up almost completely obsolete in modern Mario games, besides for the strange reappearance in New Super Mario Bros. 2 on 3DS. One other universal change is that when taking damage with a third tier power-up like the Fire Flower or Raccoon suit, Mario is reverted to his mushroom state rather than Small Mario, which is a great inclusion. I really took this feature for granted in later games, and didn't realize we've always been blessed with this basic mechanic. Now this is all great stuff, but in my eyes one of the most significant additions comes in the form of world maps. This is one of my favorite aspects of platformers and games in general. Having an extra layer of exploration that connects the main levels of a game is a cool way to make the whole experience feel more cohesive. It's something I always always look forward to with my platformers, and one of the earliest examples of this is in Super Mario Bros. 3. This game's world map is structured like a game board, starting from one end of the area and slowly progressing towards the opposite where the final castle lies. This design offers branching routes that allows you to change the order in which you play levels or to just skip some altogether. Another byproduct of introducing a world map into this game is the brief intermission between levels. Whereas the first two games moved you from level to level instantly, Super Mario Bros. 3 returns you to the overworld for a short reprieve from the action. Not only is skipping levels an option, but new activities and bonus stages become available to play. Let's go through these one by one. Toad houses are short minigames where you choose one of 3 chests to open. The power-up you receive is then placed into an inventory that can be accessed at any time from the world map. This inventory was a great addition that we wouldn't see again until New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 2009. It's nice being able to select a particular power-up for a level that's giving you trouble without making you unstoppable. The game really lets you stockpile these reserve power-ups, and I have no clue if there's a limit on how many you can hold. Spade spaces are another minigame where Toad brings you into an interrogation room and forces you to play slots, which is a great way of earning 1-ups if you're good at this game. Sadly, I was inconsistent at best, so I frequently floated between an abundance and a pittance of lives at any given time. But this minigame was still decent, and I recognize I'm just bad at it. The spade spaces with a little N that appear on top of the world map nodes grants access to a tile flipping game. This is another great way to earn reserve power-ups, but now in the form of a memory game that persists throughout your playthrough until you clear the whole board. This makes it feel less impossible to do since you can keep a mental map of where certain tiles are located for next time. Yet another feature that would only return on the Wii is roaming enemies on the map. These enemies will park themselves on certain map spaces, blocking a path until they're defeated. The types of enemies you encounter change in each world, but are most commonly hammer rows and piranha plants. These can be annoying if you're just trying to get to your next level, but they are at least nice enough to reward you with a power-up if you defeat them. One particular item that can drop from the hammer rows is a hammer, which will break rocks on the world map to open shortcuts and alternate paths to minigame spaces. I don't recall anything like this coming back in future games, but its inclusion here is pretty cool. I find choosing to opt into these bonus activities to be a more enjoyable system than the end-of-level roulette seen in Super Mario Bros. 2, and feels more fitting with these games as a whole. The freedom granted by a world map also has the effect of allowing for different types of levels or activities in the game without needing to be explained or logically connected. In the older games, players would be very confused if you played levels out of sequence order or were interrupted by random enemy encounters. Meanwhile, in Super Mario Bros. 3, you can play the levels out of order, visit a toad house or a spade space in between levels for an item, battle roaming enemies on the map, and enter uniquely themed levels such as World 2's Pyramid, World 5's Sky Entrance, World 7's Piranha Plants, and most of World 8's Machines. Imagine going from 5-2 to 5-Tower in Mario 2, or being randomly interrupted in a world to fight hammer bros or play a Toad House minigame. That would make literally no sense. But in Super Mario Bros. 3, you can move through worlds non-linearly since the path towards the final castle is always visible for you. It just makes more sense this way. Although introducing a world map is a major addition to the formula of the Mario series, this game at its core still shares the same general structure of its prequels, with being divided into several worlds of distinct themes. Each one contains a set number of levels, 1 or 2 mini-boss castles depending on how far into the game you are, and ends in an airship level. These 8 worlds are known as Grassland, Desertland, Waterland, Giantland, Skyland, Snowland, Pipeland, and Darkland. While yes, they do sound generic as hell, I'll cut it some slack for being an NES game. If Nintendo tried to name their worlds this in a future Mario game, I would be utterly floored. I don't have much to say about most of these worlds because they are as you would expect based on their naming, and talking about every level in the game sounds more boring than doing another brain-dead shrine in Tears of the Kingdom. So here are the highlights from each world that stand out from the rest of the typical Mario structure. World 1 is as normal of a world as possible. It's the easiest world, has some alternate routes on the world map to mess around with, and has the lowest number of levels. Acceptable for the first world, but feels the least special because of it. World 2 is a typical desert world with quicksand pits to avoid, but also includes some icon levels. The first requires you to jump over a sand tornado and dodge the literal sun lunging at you, and the other is a pyramid where you have to throw buzzy beetle enemies to break blocks and open paths. It's also more maze-like in its design, which can lead to time issues if you're getting lost frequently. This level is just okay. It's pretty annoying when you make a mistake with throwing the beetle, so you have to just walk away and come back to respawn them and try again. Also, the raccoon suit can bypass most of the challenge here if you can time your tailspin to break blocks for you. World 3 has some fairly fun water levels that make good use of the beloved frog suit. It's also the first world to add 2 mini-boss castles to further break up the world into thirds. Adding more underwater enemies with jets that push you around is a cool way to spice up these stages without making them more annoying than they need to be. However, I absolutely hate the giant fish that tries to eat you. He sucks when you're trying to dodge him in the water and super sucks when he leaps at you on land. A complete and total bitch. World 4 is very eccentric in its presentation, being a world where everything is larger than normal. That includes blocks, enemies, flowers, and most parts of the levels. I think it's a novel idea done well that would be reused in many future Mario games like 64 and Galaxy 2. World 5 begins as a regular regular grass world with an underground level, but then changes halfway through to become a sky world as per its name. This change occurs through a special level that has you climbing up a tower, and I think this is really cool. It feels like you're the one actually traveling up to the sky rather than teleporting there from a different world, and further enhances the continuity of the world brought upon by the level map. World 6 is an ice world that doesn't stand out very much. Most of the levels are snow themed, but Nintendo still made sure to sneak in a normal grass level, 2 underwater levels, and an auto-scroller. At least the ice physics are hardly an issue if you pay attention even a little bit. World 7 is the most unusually themed, but I gotta say Nintendo knew how to cook here. The entire world is a pipe maze, and the levels are just normal levels but with an excess amount of piranha plant enemies. A few of the stages were green pipe hell, which absolutely sucked because of the stupid ass white snapper and black muncher plant enemies they added. Nintendo was dropping these guys willy-nilly all over the place in this world that you literally can't go a few steps without seeing more of these bastards. This world almost feels like it was made specifically to get the most mileage out of the plant-based enemies. Like Nintendo was just so damn impressed by their work that they needed to dedicate an entire world to them. It is a fun world though, and I can confidently say there's nothing else like it in the rest of the game or most of the Mario series. World 8 is so different in its structure that it caught me off guard when I first reached it. The beginning of the world replaces number levels with vehicle-based missions, including an auto-scroller tank level that's similar to an airship but without vertical movement and with a ground to walk on, followed by a ship that's submerged in lava rather than flying in the sky, then concluding the trilogy with an actual airship level that scrolls at Mach Jesus. All of these levels are basically the Mario equivalent of a bullet hell, which makes them simultaneously difficult and satisfying to master. It can feel a little close to being trial and error at times, but I think these levels straddle that line well enough that I still enjoy playing them. In between the second and third vehicle levels are strange tiles that have a chance of making a hand appear to pull you into a short enemy encounter. This is some freaky shit. You can permanently close these hand portals by completing the level they drag you into, which are a lava jumping gauntlet, a ship blizzard of Cheep Cheep jumping at you.
Feel that? It's already started, my dear good friend. The shit blizzard.
And groups of hammer bros. They weren't too bad, and also they aren't very long, so I don't have any complaints. It was funny though how my girlfriend kept trying to explain some hand things in the last world of this game before I knew what the final area was, and me just being utterly perplexed about what she was trying to tell me. She likes watching speedruns of this game, so she recalled hand enemies of sorts, but I had zero clue and honestly didn't believe her until I was grabbed by one of these things for the first time. After all of this though, there's 2 normal levels, a mini boss fortress that uses a dual layout connected by doors to create an interesting traversal puzzle, another tank level, and finally you reach Bowser's Castle. This final level is a bit of a maze, but nothing that can't be handled by this point in the game. The fight against Bowser is fairly basic, with baiting him into ground slamming on the same spot multiple times so he falls through the floor into oblivion. And now that I've talked about the individual worlds, here's a couple of extra thoughts on the mini castle and airship levels. The mini castles act as a nice midway point for each world, representing a feeling of progression when you complete one and feel a few steps closer to finishing the world. They do all share the same pushover mini boss with Boom Boom, but expecting unique encounters in each one as well as in the airships I think would be too much for the era this game came out in. That being said, if my count is correct, you have to fight this guy 17 times, which is ridiculous. They could have just not included him for the last 6 or 7 or 15 times, but time is money, am I right? What the fuck? What did I say this for? It's pretty funny to go on YouTube and look at a boss compilation for this game and to see the timestamps go up to Boom Boom number 17. That's how you know Nintendo was on some devious shit in the 80s. Each world has a unique boss in their airship level in the form of the Koopalings, which is where they were first introduced before they became overused and bland nowadays. These levels are all auto-scrollers, which either leads to a feeling of indifference or overwhelming disdain from most Mario fans, but honestly I kind of like them. It almost feels like the airship is actually moving through the sky, giving these levels a distinct feel from the other standard levels in world. The airships are all basically the same though, with identical obstacles and similar types of layouts that try their absolute best to screw you up with cannonballs, fire bars, and Monty Moles throwing wrenches. None of these airships stand out on my mind, despite overall enjoying them as the closing mission for each world. As a general note on the unique icon levels throughout the game, despite these stages not being denoted by a number, they function basically like another level, except with a particular gimmick. They could have easily just been assigned another number, but giving them an icon is like a psychological trick that makes me view them as special, and I kind of like that. It's why I still appreciate that boo houses in later games don't follow the level numbering scheme, as they're designed differently than regular levels and should be thought of as such. Some other minor things I wanted to mention with the gameplay are, like many other NES games, there's a plethora of well-hidden secrets that only kids who replay this game several times, or unemployed people who have nothing better to do could find. While working on this script, I was reading through an article that listed several secrets in the game that I had zero clue about, that range from additional item houses to accessing the warp rooms to a variety of exploits. Who knew that crouching on a white block for long enough will throw you behind the objects in the foreground, because I sure as hell didn't. I think this stuff is great, and is just another reason why older games like Super Mario Bros. 3 continue to be replayed and enjoyed by fans. It gives me another reason to play it again, which is commendable for an NES game nearly 40 years later. I like the end of level picture rotator that gives you additional 1-ups for getting matching pairs across multiple stages. It's not very complicated, and it's just a simple little thing that adds to my overall enjoyment of the game. Overall, it's very easy to stack lives in this game if you're good at the various minigames and know where the secret 1-ups are in levels. Unfortunately, I was not good at these games, so I had a slightly more difficult playthrough. Super Mario Bros. 3 is the best game of the original trilogy, and there's really no competition. It's the most fleshed out, has the most interesting ideas, is the best looking, and lays a strong foundation for basically every Mario sequel to follow. This game established the idea of introducing power-ups in each sequel, the world structure and similar theming, having mini-boss castles. So much of what this game did continues to be a staple feature in every modern 2D Mario game, and that is deserving of praise. I also have fond memories of playing this game on my GBA after my dad happened to bring it home from work one day. Whereas I wasn't sure if I could ever see myself replaying the other NES titles, I could definitely see myself replaying Super Mario Bros. 3 in the future. The only part that would make this game better is if the frog suit was actually usable, but unfortunately there is no such thing as a perfect game, so I'll have to live with it. Thank you for watching.